Welcome back to the Delaware Way. As you just heard a moment ago, for the first time in 45 years, the legislature in Dover missed a deadline on the budget. And we seem to be in a continual state of crisis when it comes to the budget. How does that all end? Well, we heard from Republican Greg Lavelle, now Democratic Senator Bryan Townsend. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
Let's talk about, just because Senator Lavelle spent so much time talking about it, and I don't mean to let him set the agenda for what we talk about. So let's deal though with the prevailing wage law.
Okay.
Do you believe, as he does, that it can't be expanded to more projects, or it's going to cost the state too much money?
Well, I've certainly heard in recent days and recent weeks the idea of expanding it, perhaps even to include private projects, and that, as I understand it, sort of came out of nowhere, really. That hadn't been the heart of the debate. So I don't really know enough about it. I'm not inclined to think, from everything I've heard before, that that is the appropriate step to take, but I need to learn more about it. That wasn't what had been talked about over the course of the past budget session. I mean, there seemed to be much more of a direct assault on prevailing wage itself. And look, and I can't speak for Senator Lavelle, but if you believe that hardworking families who are in construction and these kinds of projects don't deserve strong wages for their backbreaking work, you can take that position. That's not the position that I take. That's not the position a lot of my Democratic colleagues take. If you're talking about the actual program itself and the surveys and whether the wages are reflective of the broader market, let's have that discussion. Let's make sure that the prevailing wage surveys are being done appropriately. Those are the concerns I've heard from the industry, is people not opposing prevailing wage. They just want to make sure that it's done the way it's supposed to be done. So if we can all agree on that, that's wonderful. But if people are really trying to dismantle it and just saying other things to get there, that I think is a problem for working families.
Let me just back up for a second. This isn't personal. I don't mean to make it about Senator Lavelle and about you, but just the two of you espousing to different philosophies and different political parties. And so you're here representing those philosophies as you are representing yourself. But I want to make certain that when you talked about him, I don't mean this to be just about him or just about you, but about the continual budget fight in Dover.
Sure. Oh, no, I understand that. I'm not sure if I had answered it in a way that indicates otherwise, because it was the budget fight. I mean, the Republicans made prevailing wage their #1 issue, and it didn't end up factoring in ultimately in terms of changes when the budget was finally passed, which is kind of interesting.
Well, he said it can save anywhere from $10 to $100 million, which would be significant.
Well, first, that's a huge range, so we need to figure out the actual number is. Secondly, if you're saving money by having hardworking construction families not earn much when they do that work, I think that's a problem.
So if you're going to go for a contract, and I brought this up with Senator Lavelle, if I'm going to get a contract for my house and somebody says to me, because of a government regulation, you have to pay 30% more, then if you have a way out of that, you're going to take if it's not inferior work, you're going to take the smaller contract just because it's within your means. Well, if you're increasing all government contracts by 25%, that's a budget problem, isn't it?
Well, so I think that's the heart of the issue, is what exactly are we talking about when it comes to prevailing wage? Are we talking about expanding the scope to private projects? Again, that's something that came out of left field to me in recent weeks. I hadn't recalled hearing that as part of the budget discussion. So, or if you're talking about the survey being broken, then let's figure out, is the survey broken? Is the data that's being collected by the Department of Labor reflective of the broader market? I mean, let's talk about that. For sure, let's talk about that on behalf of taxpayers and on behalf of the public. But what we shouldn't, I would hope we wouldn't have to talk about is the heart of prevailing wage, which is the idea that for state projects, as currently structured, hardworking people are going to be able to earn good wages. And I think there's been a lot of disagreement, because sometimes Senator Lavelle or others will point to the hourly rates that are listed and not acknowledge that includes all, that's an all-in number, including benefits and all those things. So when you actually back out those numbers, it's more reasonable wage that people are earning. And if you want to gut that, we're going to have real problems in society, I think. So it really depends what we're talking about.
There's a compromise to be made, is what you're saying. It's from where he is and from where you are, there seems to be, you're acknowledging there may be some problems with the survey, and you have to look at that, and there may even be some problems in expanding the scope. So there's some wiggle room here.
I would hope so, but I didn't, and I wasn't in the negotiation rooms during the budget, but I didn't really see that approach from the Republicans in Dover this past budget. It was very much sort of, let's talk about it generally speaking. Let's hate on it generally. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'll be the first to say I'm wrong about that. But then come to us. Come to those of us who are willing to have conversations and figure out the issues. And let's have conversations and figure out the issues.
One last thing, and I know this is uncomfortable for you because of your relationship with Tony DeLuca, but he specifically said that Tony DeLuca put up a posting for a public hearing on the prevailing wage law on a Friday for a hearing that same day. He took it down, but then the next week there was a posting that went up and said, "Oh, the issue's been solved. You know, we've changed the law." And again, they admitted that was a mistake and took it down. But Senator Lavelle said someone has to be held accountable, and he specifically mentioned Tony DeLuca from the Labor Department. Do you want to comment on that?
So I'll comment on it because it's an important issue. I'm not in the Labor Committee in the Senate, and so the Labor Department is not something that's directly under my purview. And my predecessor was Senator DeLuca, who also works at the Department of Labor. I think what had happened, as I understand it, was a little bit different timeline from what you just said, but not materially so in terms of the heart of the issue was it a good idea to talk about an expansion of prevailing wage in the summer in July, just after having passed the budget, with very little notice to people? And I don't think that was a good idea.
And then the week later saying,
or a few weeks later, whatever that ended up happening. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been a good thing to have done, and we need to solve these issues in a productive way. So as I understand it, it wasn't done in the way that I would advocate for. I don't know exactly who's responsible. I think we've got to find a solution for it. This a little bit goes to the issue of you know, I would love to vote on a Labor nominee. I would love to vote on Patrice Gilliam Johnson. I would love for the governor to go ahead and put her name forward and have the Department of Labor get moving forward to solving the problems that we know exist in the Department of Labor. And if this is one of them, then that's fine. Let's solve those issues, because the Department of Labor plays a critical role with regard to labor law enforcement. It plays a critical role with regard to skills and job training. We need to go ahead and say, this is the secretary. She has the authority she needs to get these things done. And then it doesn't turn into the kind of political fight in the General Assembly that distracts from really important work the public needs us to do.
Let's talk more about that important work and the bigger scope of the budget and the continuing crisis when we continue our conversation with Senator Bryan Townsend as the Delaware Way continues.